we're gonna swap the car in 17.
So you don't think I'm gonna catch up or what?
Yes. I can go back in short 6. And Sainz 1.4 behind.
You want to let fast as well?
That's a P8.
What if I told you that the most anticipated signing of the year is staggering from within and that Ferrari could be reliving his old strategic ghosts, just when it seemed that everything marched well? Today I tell you the story behind the Hamilton-Ferrari scandal in Miami, and why Vasseur is in the center of a storm that can redefine the 2025 season. It all started as one more day in the Formula One calendar. The Miami 2025 Grand Prix promised show, but ended up undressing a conflict that had been in silence within Ferrari for weeks. Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, had managed to trace from the number 12 of the grille. With medium tires in a better condition than the hard ones of his partner Charles Leclerc, he cut back differences after return, until he placed just behind Monegasco. At that time he asked for something logical from the competitive, that they would allow him to advance to try to reach Kimi Antonelli, who rolled in front in 6th position. Ferrari's wall response was anything but immediate. Minutes passed. And in Formula One, minutes mean distances, opportunities and strategies that fader. Hamilton, clearly irritated by the team's silence, began to release messages with a tone that left no doubt about his frustration. He recalled that in China he took a side without discussion when required. But this time, on the other side of the radio, he only obtained one understanding lacking action. To that he responded with an irony that has already turned viral. Yes, take a break for tea in the meantime. The situation climbed quickly. Ferrari finally allowed overtaking, but when Hamilton failed to cut enough land with respect to Antonelli, the team changed decision. He was ordered to return the position to Leclerc. The tactical confusion was as great as the disappointment of the British pilot. In the final moments of the race, Hamilton could no longer hide his anger. He even questioned if he should also let Carlos Sainz, who came much further behind, when the team communicated the distance with respect to the next car on the track. This episode was not a simple disagreement between pilot and box's wall. It was the crystallization of something deeper, the lack of clear leadership within Ferrari, the absence of a firm and coordinated decision structure. In a team that aspires to championships, these hesitations not only cost positions, they cost trust, they cost respect. And worst of all, they sow a division seed that can grow in each race, in each lap, in each badly executed decision. In Miami, that seed germinated in public. And with her, something that will not be easy to repair was broken. Frédéric Vasseur knew he had to talk. The controversy unleashed by Hamilton's messages and team management in Miami could not be left unanswered. And as Ferrari director, his role was to defend the decisions of the wall. He did it with determination, insisting that the strategy followed during the Grand Prix had logic. For Vasseur, the criterion was simple. If a pilot advances to his partner, he must justify it with results. If you fail to reach the car onwards, you must return the position. A clear policy on paper, but that in the execution was completely exposed. Vasseur also tried to reduce the perception of chaos that the television transmission had left. According to him, delays in the radio signal showed a more messy version of what really happened. But the problem was not only the way it was perceived. The real conflict was at the bottom of the strategy. Because although there is an internal norm, the wall response time was slow enough to compromise Hamilton's opportunity. And in Formula One, acting late is the same as not acting. The inevitable question that arose after Vasseur's statements was whether it was a rational defense or simply a justification against poor management. Because beyond the speech, what was seen on the track was a team that hesitated, that contradicted himself and did not know how to manage two pilots hungry for results. Vasseur says they run for Ferrari. But that statement is empty when decisions harm one of its pilots in full comeback. Vasseur's role in Ferrari is at a crossroads. On the one hand, it seeks to build a strong team culture without favoritism. But on the other, he needs to lead clearly in times of tension. And that didn't happen in Miami. His attempt to give explanations only opened new doubts. Because if politics is so clear, why was it applied so slowly and so inconsistent? The feeling that left his intervention was that of a team that still does not know how to handle a high-caliber duo without self-boycotting. And that, in such a tight championship, is a luxury that Ferrari cannot afford. The scandal in Miami was not an isolated fact. It was, rather, the logical consequence of a pattern that had already begun to be shown in Australia. Lewis Hamilton's debut with Ferrari was loaded with expectations, not only for his status as multiple world champion, but because he represented a new era for Italian team. However, what should be a glorious presentation ended up being a day marked by confusion. From the classification, where both Ferrari were out of the first rows, to a career full of strategic errors, the team showed worrying symptoms of uncoordination. Hamilton, throughout that weekend in Albert Park, fought to feel comfortable with the car. And although at times it managed to match and even exceed the rhythm of Leclerc, the adaptation was not immediate. He tried to approach the driving style of Monegasco, especially in the braking phases, but it was not enough to translate into a blunt result. What was perceived was a clear disconnection between the pilot's potential and the car's ability to translate that talent into solid points. All this in a circuit where the track conditions were changing, and where Ferrari's strategy failed again when choosing the time to make the change of tires when the rain came. Beyond the result itself, the most disturbing thing was the feeling that Ferrari was not prepared to respond in high-pressure situations. Hamilton spent a good part of the stuck race without the team finding solutions. And that type of tactical impotence in his first weekend dressed in red was a clear sign that the problems were not circumstantial but structural. The team left Australia with a single point in the pocket for Hamilton, and many more questions than answers about its internal operation. What happened later in Miami did nothing but confirm that trend. The lack of synchrony between pilot and wall, the improvised decisions, the slowness to react, everything had already had a precedent. Australia was the silent warning, and Miami the inevitable explosion. The worrying thing is that instead of correcting the errors, Ferrari seems to have amplified them. In just 2 races, the team that should be a candidate for the title showed deep cracks. And if they do not close them soon, the rest of the season could become a sequence of lost opportunities. The dilemma facing Ferrari this season goes beyond the management of strategies or car performance. It is a matter of identity, leadership, and internal structure. In Maranello now 2 very different figures live together, but equally ambitious. Charles Leclerc, the pilot formed at home, symbol of the new generation of Ferrari, and Lewis Hamilton, the consecrated legend that arrives with the aura of multiple champion and the experience of having dominated a complete era in Mercedes. Both want to win, both are considered to lead. But there is only one number 1 seat in each team, and Ferrari has not yet defined who really occupies it. Charles Leclerc represents continuity. He has been with Ferrari since he rose to Formula One and has become the face of the team. His talent is indisputable and his speed on a turns fearsome. However, in his years at the head of the team, he has shown that he needs a stable environment and a balanced car to constantly shine. Hamilton, on the other hand, brings with it a completely different mentality. Accustomed to environments where everything revolves around him, he expects firm decisions, total equipment support, and a margin of maneuver that allows him to apply his career approach. They are 2 completely different communication and leadership styles. The problem is that Ferrari, in his eagerness to avoid internal conflicts, has not defined a clear hierarchy. Instead of establishing roles, he has let the track and circumstances decide. But that ambiguous position is not working. What was seen in Miami was the consequence of that lack of direction. Indecision when managing the duel between the 2 pilots was not only a technical issue, but political. When a team does not have a dominant voice in key moments, what is generated is confusion, frustration, and eventually break. And the most dangerous thing is that this situation can climb. As the season progresses, each point will be more valuable, each more sensitive team order. If Ferrari does not establish a clear internal structure, the friction between Leclerc and Hamilton could go from isolated incidents to a constant conflict. The team has the necessary talent to fight for the championship, but if it does not solve this dilemma, it could end up losing it not due to lack of speed, but for lack of cohesion. In Formula One, the greatest enemy is not always in the front garage, sometimes it is in the box next door. Formula One has always been a scenario of talent, speed, and technology, but also of complex human relations and decisions that mark the fate of a team. In Ferrari, all that is getting intertwined in a narrative that barely begins to be written. What happened in Australia and Miami are not only isolated chapters, but the first pages of a story that can be defined as redemption or collapse. Everything will depend on how Ferrari chooses to advance, whether he is able to correct his mistakes before it is too late, and if their leaders can put aside the ego in favor of the common goal. Lewis Hamilton has made it clear that he did not arrive in Maranello to be part of an experiment. He wants to win. He wants to be champion again. And he knows he can't do it alone. You need a team that responds, make decisions clearly, and support it in the key moments. Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, has been defending Ferrari's colors for years, but now he must share prominence with one of the greatest pilots in history. The conflict is inevitable. What is at stake is much more than points or podiums. The identity of the team is at stake. Therefore, what happens in the next races will be crucial. Can Ferrari find a way to integrate two leaders without breaking inside? Will Vasseur be able to impose a structure that gives stability to a team as pressed by the present as for its past? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a season marked by the wasted potential? Now it's your turn. Do you think Ferrari can resist this storm and get strengthened? Or do you think this internal tension is the beginning of the end for its 2025 season? Leave me your opinion.